The wind that cuts through Red Hollow, Texas in late November doesn't just chill you. It finds the broken places, the thin coat with the missing button, the worn-out shoes with the crack along the sole, the hollow space behind the ribs where a hot meal used to be. It finds every crack in your armor and settles there, patient and merciless, like it has all the time in the world to finish what hardship already started. Maya Collins was 23 years old, 7 months pregnant, and standing on the edge of a decision that no woman should ever have to make. She had been walking for 40 minutes in the dark, not walking toward something, walking away from nothing. Because when you have nothing left, even nothing feels like something you need to escape. 2 nights ago, the landlord had changed the lock. He hadn't called, hadn't knocked, just changed the lock and left her 2 garbage bags of belongings on the porch like they were old furniture. Maya had sat on those bags for an hour in the cold, unable to fully understand that the word homeless now applied to her baby. She pressed her hand to her belly. 7 months, a daughter. She had already chosen the name, Lily. She had whispered it to her stomach every night, a quiet promise that the world waiting for her would be soft and safe and full of warmth. That promise felt very far away tonight. She had spent the first night in the 24-hour laundromat on Fletcher Street, pretending to wait for clothes that weren't in any machine. The second night she had knocked on the door of her friend Dana's apartment, but Dana's new boyfriend had opened the door instead, taken one long look at Maya's belly and her garbage bags, and said Dana wasn't home. Maya had heard Dana's laugh from somewhere inside the apartment. She had picked up her bags and walked back into the dark without a word. She hadn't eaten in 31 hours. She knew the exact number because she had been counting, the way you count things when counting is the only control you have left. Her back ached with the particular cruelty that comes with carrying a child and carrying fear at the same time. Her fingers were numb inside gloves that had lost most of their lining. She kept walking because stopping felt like giving up, and giving up was the one thing she refused to name out loud. That was when she saw the light. It spilled out from a low building set back from the road, warm, amber, alive. She could hear the low rumble of voices, the occasional burst of laughter, the distant throb of a stereo playing something with a deep bass line. A row of motorcycles stood parked out front like a metal congregation, chrome catching the moonlight. Maya knew what it was before she read the sign. Everyone in Red Hollow knew the Iron Skull's MC. They were the kind of men mothers warned teenagers about and shop owners watched through window glass. They were loud at the diner and took up too much space at the gas station and rode through town in packs that made people slow their cars and stare. She had heard the stories. Rough men, hard lives, no patience for weakness. She almost kept walking. But then a gust of wind moved through her like a blade, and her daughter kicked, a sharp, desperate little flutter, and Maya stopped walking and stood very still in the dark, and she made herself ask the question she had been avoiding for 2 days. If not here, then where? There was no answer. The wind didn't offer one. The dark didn't offer one. 31 hours of empty stomach and 2 nights of nowhere to sleep had used up every other option she had. She crossed the road, walked past the motorcycles, and knocked on the door of the Iron Skull's clubhouse like she was knocking on the last door left in the world. The man who opened it was enormous. That was the only word for him. He filled the entire doorframe, broad shoulders under a leather vest, arms like old oak branches, a beard that had been growing since some decade Maya hadn't yet been born in. A patch on his vest read gravel. His eyes, dark and unreadable, moved from her face to her belly to the garbage bags at her feet, and he said nothing. Behind him, the room had already gone quiet. Maya had prepared herself for many things: laughter, dismissal, the door closing in her face. She had prepared herself to beg if she had to, because dignity is a luxury that disappears somewhere around hour 20 of not eating. What she had not prepared herself for was the complete, total silence of a room full of hard men staring at her like she was something they didn't know how to categorize. She looked past Gravel into that room, maybe 18, 20 men, leather vests, tattoos, the accumulated roughness of lives lived outside the lines, and she said the only true thing she had left. "I haven't eaten since yesterday morning." Her voice was steadier than she expected. "I don't have anywhere to go tonight. I know what this place is, and I know I have no right to be here, but my baby needs to survive. I need to know if there's any food, anything. I'll leave right after, I promise." The silence stretched for 3 full seconds. Then a voice from somewhere in the back of the room said simply and without any ceremony, "Someone heat up the chili." His name was Boone, and he was the president of the Iron Skulls MC, and he had the kind of face that looked like it had made 1,000 hard decisions and regretted a few of them. He was not a soft man. He had not lived a soft life, but he pulled out a chair at the table nearest the heater without being asked, and he gestured at it and said, "Sit, you're letting the cold in." Maya sat. What happened next in that clubhouse on the edge of Red Hollow, Texas, was something none of the men there would ever fully explain to outsiders, because it didn't fit the story outsiders already believed about them. A man named Decker, who had served 12 years for armed robbery and had been out for 2, heated up a pot of chili and cut bread and brought it to her like he was setting a table for someone important. A man named Trick, who was missing 2 fingers on his left hand and never talked about why, quietly set a glass of water beside her plate and then moved away without making it a thing. A man named Santos, who sent money home to a mother in Corpus Christi every month and never mentioned it to anyone, disappeared into the back room and came back with a folded blanket that smelled like cedar. Maya ate. She tried to be dignified about it and failed, and nobody made her feel anything about that. The room had gone back to its usual low rumble of conversation, but there was something different in the texture of it now, quieter at the edges, more careful, like men adjusting their volume for someone who needed rest. Boone sat across from her while she ate, not hovering, just present, and he asked her 3 questions in the same tone another man might ask about the weather. Where was she from? How long had she been outside? Did she have anyone? She told him the truth, because there was nothing left to lose by telling the truth. She was from Abilene originally. She had been in Red Hollow for 8 months, following a man who had left 4 months ago when the pregnancy stopped being theoretical and became real. She had lost her job at the diner when she could no longer stay on her feet for 8-hour shifts. She had no family close enough to call. She had $18 in her coat pocket, a phone with a cracked screen and 11% battery, and a daughter named Lily who was due in 2 months. Boone listened to all of this without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "You got a doctor? Prenatal visits and all that?" Maya said she had missed the last 2 appointments. Boone nodded slowly, the way a man nods when he is calculating something and not sharing the calculation yet. He said, "Okay. Just that. Okay." But in the language of men who mean what they say and say very little, okay meant something. The complication came from outside. Around 10 o'clock that night, a truck pulled up in front of the clubhouse and a man got out who Maya recognized before she could stop herself. Her ex, Derek, who had left 4 months ago and had apparently still been tracking her through a shared location app she had forgotten to disable. He was drunk and he was loud, and he stood outside the door and said things that a decent person would be ashamed to say at any volume. The room went very still in a different way than it had gone still when Maya first arrived. This was not the stillness of surprise. This was the stillness of men deciding. Boone stood up slowly from his chair and walked to the door and opened it, and he stepped outside and he closed the door behind him. 3 other men followed without being asked. Maya sat inside with her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that someone had placed in front of her at some point, and she heard low voices and then the sound of a truck door closing and an engine starting, and then silence. Boone came back inside and sat back down in his chair and picked up his own coffee. "He won't be back tonight," he said. Maya stared at him. "What did you say to him?" Boone looked at her over his mug. "We had a conversation," he said, which was apparently all he intended to say about it. She did not ask again. That night, Maya slept on a real bed, a cot in a back room that had been cleared of storage boxes and fitted with clean sheets and the cedar blanket. She slept for 9 hours, which was the longest she had slept in 2 months. And when she woke up, she lay still for a few minutes, just listening to the silence and feeling, for the first time in a very long time, that she was not required to be afraid. In the morning, Boone was at the table with coffee and a plate of eggs and a piece of paper with an address written on it. "That's a women's shelter over in Clarkson," he said, 30 miles east. "Good people run it. They have a room available. I already called and confirmed. They'll take you today." He slid the paper across the table. "Decker's going to drive you. Santos is going to follow in his truck with your bags. You've got an OB appointment already set up at the clinic on Marsh Street for Friday. It's paid for." Maya stared at him. "You set all that up this morning?" "It's nearly 11, he said, as if that explained it completely. She didn't know what to say. She had walked into a place expecting nothing and had been handed more practical help in 12 hours than she had received from anyone in 4 months of crisis. "Why?" she finally asked. It came out small and honest and uncertain. Boone was quiet for a moment. He looked at his coffee. "I had a mother," he said slowly, "who needed a door to open once, and nobody opened it." He paused. "I've been thinking about that for about 40 years now." He did not look up when he said it. He did not seem to be looking for a reaction. He said it the way men say the truest things, quietly, almost to the side, like the truth is too heavy to carry facing forward. Maya pressed her hand to her belly. Lily moved. She started to cry, and she didn't apologize for it, and nobody in the room made her feel that she should. Lily Rose Collins was born on a Tuesday in January, healthy and loud, 7 pounds and 4 ounces, with a full head of dark hair and an opinion about everything. Maya was at the shelter in Clarkson, where the staff had helped her apply for assistance programs, enroll in a job training course, and get on the waiting list for subsidized housing. She sent a message to Boone from the hospital that morning. Just 3 words. "She's here. Safe." He replied 2 hours later. "Good. Name's perfect." 3 weeks after Lily was born, a package arrived at the shelter with no return address. Inside was a small leather bracelet, the kind bikers sometimes wear, simple and plain and braided, with a tiny charm on the clasp in the shape of a lily flower, delicate enough that it must have taken deliberate searching to find. There was a note card inside with 11 words written in a heavy hand. "For Lily, so she knows someone stood for her. Iron Skulls." Maya tied it around Lily's tiny wrist, where it hung loose and would stay loose for years before her daughter grew into it. She told Lily the story before Lily was old enough to understand it. And then she told it again when she was old enough to remember. And she told it a 3rd time when Lily was 7 and came home from school crying because a girl in her class said that bikers were criminals and dangerous and nobody should trust them. Maya sat with her daughter on the edge of the bed and she said, "Let me tell you about the night you kept me alive." Because here is what Red Hollow, Texas never quite understood about the Iron Skulls MC. They were not good men by the story the town had written for them. They were complex men. Men with records and regrets and rough histories and choices they had made in the dark that they carried quietly. But complex is not the same as cold. Rough is not the same as heartless. And the story the world writes about a person is almost never the whole story. The world had written a story about Maya Collins too, a young woman who made bad choices, trusted the wrong man, lost her apartment, and ended up with nothing. A cautionary tale, a statistic. But statistics do not have daughters named Lily. Cautionary tales do not knock on impossible doors with trembling hands and ask for help not for themselves, but for someone not yet born. And the measure of a person has never been the difficulty of the situation they found themselves in.
It has always been what they chose to do inside that difficulty.
Maya chose to knock. Boone chose to open. And Lily came into the world safe. There is something this story asks of every person who hears it, and it is not a small thing. It asks you to look again at the person you have already filed away in a category, at the man with the leather vest and the rough face and the reputation that arrived before he did, at the woman outside your door with the garbage bags, at anyone you have let the world's story replace with your own assumptions. Because the night that changes everything rarely looks the way you expect it to, and the person who opens the door for you might be the last one you thought to knock for. Do not walk past the last door because it doesn't look right from the outside. Sometimes the light you need most is coming from somewhere you never planned to look. If this story moved something in you, share it with someone who needs to be reminded that help can come from unexpected places, and that asking for it is not weakness, it is the beginning of survival. This is Paths of Honor, because the truest stories are the ones that ask something of us. Subscribe if you believe every soul deserves a door that opens. What is the significant educational and other value in this story? This story carries several layers of genuine human value that reach far beyond entertainment. It confronts the reality of prenatal homelessness, a crisis that affects millions of young women who fall through every social safety net simultaneously, losing housing, income, and support systems at the most physically and emotionally vulnerable period of their lives. By centering this experience, the story creates awareness without shame and models dignified help-seeking as an act of courage rather than failure. It challenges the psychology of stereotyping directly and honestly. The audience is placed inside Maya's fear of the iron skulls before experiencing their humanity, mirroring the cognitive journey most people take when confronted with someone they have prejudged.